Hey guys, before we start, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if you have any feedback. Let's go to the story. I, 28 walked out of my own wedding, right at the altar. Not because of cold feet, not because of drama. Well, not mine. I left because my fiancée thought humiliating me in front of 120 people was just a joke. What? She didn't know. I'd been ready for it. Let's back up. I work in marketing for a tech company based in Denver. I'm not flashy, but I do well. Until recently, I was engaged to Lila, 27F. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming in 2019. She was outgoing, sarcastic, sharp, instantly magnetic. We clicked hard. We have the same taste in obscure indie music, the same love for bad reality TV, and the same weird sense of humor. Or at least, I thought we had the same sense of humor. We moved in after a year. Our apartment was the usual cookie cutter, two-bedroom setup with beige walls and neighbors who vacuumed at 2 a.m. But we made it feel like home. We even adopted a giant Maine Coon named Bowie, named after David Bowie, naturally. He had different colored eyes and an ego bigger than mine. Lila used to joke that he was my actual soulmate. For a while, I believed Lila was it. She could make me laugh like no one else. She knew how to get me out of my head when work got overwhelming. She'd text me memes while I was stuck in traffic on I-25, and I'd still smile at my phone like an idiot. But there was always this thing about her. She loved pranks. And not the harmless kind. More like the kind that toes the line of emotional damage but gets written off as you're being too sensitive. Like when I got promoted to senior marketing manager after grinding for 3 years. She threw a surprise party, which was awesome. Until she toasted me by saying I must have bribed my way up because he's not that smart. Trust me. Everyone laughed awkwardly. My boss was there. My team. I stood there holding a beer and trying to act like I wasn't dying inside. When I told her later it hurt, she just rolled her eyes. Lighten up, Nate. It's a joke. That should have been the moment I realized she wasn't joking. She was testing how much she could get away with. But the worst was yet to come. 6 months later, I proposed. I'd saved up for the ring she'd not so subtly circled online and planned it for her favorite Italian restaurant. She said no. Not jokingly. Well, not at first. For a full 5 minutes, she fake cried at the table about how she wasn't ready, while other diners stared and a waiter hovered with a dessert menu and pity in his eyes. Then, just as I was spiraling into a full-blown panic attack, she burst out laughing and shouted, "Of course I'll marry you, dummy." I laughed, too, eventually. Because when you love someone, you ignore the red flags if they're painted with glitter. My best friend Jonah? He wasn't buying it. He'd always said Lila was manipulative, that she weaponized embarrassment and called it love. I brushed it off. Told him he didn't get her humor. It turns out he got it better than I ever did. Weddings are supposed to bring people together. Ours felt like a slow-motion car crash wrapped in pastel linen and overpriced centerpieces. The planning started off fine, venue booked in Boulder, not too far from the city, with mountains in the background and twinkle lights strung over a wooden gazebo. Pinterest perfect. Lila wanted elegant but chill, which translated to high-budget aesthetics with forced casualness. Think mason jars filled with $80 bouquets. I didn't care. I just wanted her to be happy. But somewhere in the middle of cake tastings and seating charts, something shifted. She got colder. Not cold in a dramatic way, just detached. Less affectionate. Snappier. Like everything I did annoyed her, but she didn't want to explain why. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Everyone says it's normal. But I started noticing things. She stopped calling me by nicknames. Stopped texting during the day. She'd spend hours on her phone, then snap it shut the second I walked in. Once, I caught her deleting a message when I passed behind her on the couch. She claimed it was just a dumb meme. I didn't push. And then there was Blake. I'd heard his name before. They dated in college and broken up before graduation. Toxic, she'd said once. No way I'd ever go back there. So, imagine my surprise when his name popped up on our guest list. When I asked her about it, she didn't even blink. We're adults. It's not weird. He's friends with a few people from the old dorm group. Besides, he lives in New York. He won't come. I let it go. Tried to trust her. Jonah didn't. He pulled me aside at my bachelor party, just a handful of close friends, a rented cabin, and too much whiskey, and said, "Man, are you sure you're good?" "Yeah." "Why?" He hesitated. "Lila's been weird." "I don't know. You just seem off. Like you're trying hard to pretend you're not walking into a trap." I laughed it off. Said he was being dramatic. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was small, just immediate family and the bridal party. Lila was already tipsy before the salad course. She kept clinking her glass for toasts, each one more chaotic than the last. At one point, she stood up and said, "I don't know what I did to deserve Nathan, but whatever it was, it probably involved blackmail." Laughter. Some polite. Some confused. I smiled tightly. Later that night, one of her bridesmaids, Emma, I think, caught me outside while I was grabbing my jacket from the car. She was buzzed, swaying a little, trying to light a cigarette without success. "You're gonna marry her?" she slurred. I blinked. "That's the plan." She gave me this sad smile. "You're brave. Or blind. Or both." I didn't say anything. She shrugged, dropped her lighter, and walked back inside. That was the first time I felt it, not just doubt, but dread. The feeling that I wasn't marrying a person. I was marrying a performance. The morning of the wedding felt off from the moment I opened my eyes. Not nerves, at least, not mine. Just this low hum in my chest like something was about to short-circuit. Like I was standing on a cliff, and no one else could hear the wind howling behind me. Jonah picked me up in his truck around 8 a.m. We were supposed to get to the venue early for pictures and final walkthroughs. He had a thermos of coffee and a look on his face that said, "I'm here, but I hate every second of this." He didn't speak for most of the drive. Then, halfway through downtown, he just muttered, "You don't have to go through with it, you know." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was easier than screaming. Bit late for that. But I kept thinking about Emma's comment. The cigarette that wouldn't light. Brave or blind or both. We got to the venue around 10. Lila was already inside, surrounded by her bridesmaids, getting her makeup done like a celebrity about to film a magazine cover. I didn't even see her. I wasn't supposed to. Bad luck, someone said. Sure. The groomsmen were half-dressed and half-hungover. Everyone was buzzing around, stylists and photographers darting like bees, capturing candid moments that were choreographed to the second. I went outside for some air. That's when he showed up. Blake. Tall, smug, and entirely too comfortable for someone who should have RSVP'd no. He was wearing a tailored blue suit and sunglasses that didn't hide how amused he looked to be standing there. "Nathan," he said like we were old friends. "Congrats, man. Big day." I nodded. "Didn't expect to see you." He smiled. "Didn't expect to be invited. But hey, can't say no to a good show." The way he said show made my stomach twist. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, casual, rehearsed, and leaned in just enough to say, low and slow, "She always said I was the one who got away. Guess I'll see if that's still true tonight." Then he walked off, whistling. And I just stood there, motionless. It hit me all at once. Every weird glance, every cold shoulder, every deleted message, every half apology wrapped in a joke. Blake wasn't the past. He was the plan B she kept in her back pocket. And now? He was here. Front row. Smiling like he'd already won. I went back inside. Let the makeup artist dab my face like nothing had happened. Put on the tie. Buttoned the jacket. Smiled at the photographer. But inside, something had snapped. Not broken. Just cleared. And for the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what I was going to do. They say you don't remember your wedding ceremony. That the nerves make it blur. But I remember every second of mine. Because I never said a single word. The sun was out. Too bright. The kind of light that makes everyone squint just enough to look confused in photos. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle. Mason jars of lavender and baby's breath swayed in the breeze. Lila's mother was already dabbing her eyes and whispering about how perfect it all looked. I stood at the altar, heart calm. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I had already made peace with what I was about to do. Jonah stood next to me. Silent. Stone-faced. We'd said nothing since Blake showed up. But the look he gave me when the music started playing, that was all I needed. Then she walked in. Lila. She looked like every bridal magazine cover ever printed. Hair swept up. Dress flowing. Smile bright and brittle. Everyone stood. Cameras clicked. And I saw her eyes scan the crowd, landing briefly, just briefly, on Blake. And she smiled wider. Like this was hers. She got to the altar, hands cool and dry when she reached for mine. Her voice trembled, not from emotion, but from excitement. A kind of stage excitement. The officiant started his speech. Generic stuff. Love, partnership, shared futures. And then came the part. If anyone here objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. Then, Blake cleared his throat. Loud. Several heads turned. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the seats. Lila giggled. Ignore him, she whispered. The officiant smiled awkwardly and moved on. Nathan, do you? I held up a hand. Actually, I do have something to say. You could hear the air get sucked out of the whole venue. Lila's smile froze. I looked at her. Really looked. And I said, I love the idea of commitment. I love the idea of marriage. But I don't love being a prop in someone else's show. She blinked. Whispered, what are you doing? I'm doing what I should have done the night you laughed at my proposal. Or the night you called me pathetic in front of my friends. Or the day you put your ex-boyfriend on the guest list and said he wouldn't come, but smiled when he did. The crowd was still. Jonah stepped forward and placed a small folder in my hand. Paper copies of every text, every message, every photo Carmen had pulled. I handed it to Lila. You wanted a moment? Here it is. And then I walked away. Just like that. Down the aisle. Past the stunned guests. Past her parents. Past Blake, who for the first time all day wasn't smiling. I didn't run. I walked, slowly, steadily, out of the garden, across the venue lawn, and straight into the gravel lot where Jonah's truck was already waiting, engine running like he'd rehearsed this with me 100 times. We didn't say a word until we hit the highway. Then he just muttered, about damn time. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just burst out of me like a cracked pipe finally venting steam. We drove an hour into the city, grabbed tacos from a food truck, and sat in a random park like two guys who'd just come back from a battlefield. By sunset, my phone had 47 missed calls. Half from Lila. Half from her mom. 3 from Blake, which was honestly the most hilarious part. The text ranged from, I can't believe you did this to me, to, we can fix this if you stop being dramatic. Fix this? She'd spent months turning me into a joke and thought we could just patch it up? Nah. I turned the phone off and left it that way for the next 2 days. What I didn't expect was how fast it would go public. One of Lila's cousins live-streamed the ceremony for a few friends who couldn't attend and left the stream running after I walked off. Someone clipped the moment, posted it. Then came the TikToks. Then Reddit. By the end of the week, #RunawayGroom was trending locally. I didn't post anything. Didn't comment. Didn't like or share or hint. But I watched. People debated whether it was real. Whether I was cruel. Whether Lila deserved it. Whether Blake was the villain. Everyone had an opinion. But none of them were there. They didn't see the years leading up to that moment. The emotional paper cuts are disguised as sarcasm. The manipulation is hidden under, just joking. So I didn't argue. I let the internet have its drama. And I let myself have peace. Harper texted me a few days in. Just a simple. Proud of you. Drink soon. Yes. Definitely. I moved my stuff out of our apartment 2 weeks later. Jonah came to help. Most of it was mine anyway. Lila had always liked to decorate with things that photographed well, not things that felt like home. She showed up once while I was packing. No cameras. No yelling. Just this dull, quiet anger. You embarrassed me, she said. I looked at her. You built a life around embarrassing me. She didn't argue. Just stood there, blinking like the realization had only just started to settle in. Then she said, you know you'll regret this, right? I smiled. No. But I think you might. I always thought starting over would feel dramatic. Like dyeing your hair or moving cross-country or finally getting that tattoo you said you'd get when you escaped. But for me, it was simple. Quiet mornings. Black coffee. A new apartment with bare walls and furniture that matched. I stopped flinching at texts. Started sleeping better. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was apologizing just for existing. People reached out. Some with support, some digging for gossip. I ignored most of it, except one. A message request from someone I didn't recognize. Lauren B. Subject. I think you deserve to know this. I hesitated. Opened it. It was long. Calm. Detailed. No dramatic flair. Turns out that Lauren had dated Blake 2 years ago, briefly. The overlap between him and Lila? Not so brief. He told me about her. Said they were still tied together emotionally. I didn't know she was engaged. I found out later, after he dumped me and ghosted me for another girl. I didn't say anything then. But after seeing the clip of your wedding, I figured you'd want the truth. I'm sorry. Attached was a screenshot Blake and Lila in a hotel bar. Timestamped. Dated just 2 weeks before our wedding. She was kissing his cheek. His hand was on her thigh. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of heartbreak, but out of relief. Because it confirmed what I already knew. I hadn't dodged a bullet. I'd stepped out of a collapsing building just before the roof caved in. I wrote back to Lauren. Thanked her. Told her I appreciated the honesty. She replied once more. Took me a while to say it, but you were the lucky one. Yeah, I was. After that, the final pieces fell into place. I deleted the shared Google Calendar, took my name off the old utilities, and shut down the wedding website we never bothered to close. Done. There was nothing left tying me to her. Except one thing. It came a month later. Late. Almost midnight. I was on the couch, bowl of popcorn in my lap, watching some mindless true crime doc with Jonah snoring in the armchair beside me. Lila's name popped up on my screen. No, hey. No subject line. Just a wall of text in my DMs. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how things ended, for how I made you feel. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I think I was scared. Scared of how much you loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I wanted you to know I'm in therapy now. And I see it. I see how I hurt you. Okay. Fine. Good for her, right? I kept reading. I still think about you. I still miss what we had. Maybe this isn't the right time, but if you ever want to talk, I'd love to meet. Just catching up. I understand if you don't, but I hope you will. That's when I felt it. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. Because this wasn't about healing or regret. It was about control. She hadn't gotten the last word at the altar. She hadn't gotten the final say online. She hadn't been able to spin the story, and now, weeks later, she was trying to wedge her way back in, not to fix anything, but to remind me she could. I didn't reply. I screenshotted it, saved it, then deleted the message, blocked her number. Again. This time, I didn't flinch. I turned back to the TV. Jonah stirred and glanced at me. You good? I nodded. Better than I've ever been. Cool, he mumbled. Pass the popcorn. That was it. No dramatic finale. No mic drop. Just peace. The real kind. The kind where someone tries to pull you back into the fire, and you don't even feel the heat anymore. Exactly 1 year after the wedding that wasn't, I found myself standing in a hardware store, holding a can of wood stain in one hand and a plant I definitely didn't know how to keep alive in the other. That's what life had become. Quiet. Simple. Mine. The apartment had changed. Still small, still modest, but every piece in it now had meaning. No more decorative pillows that only existed for Instagram. No more cold, curated spaces. Just warm lighting, a used record player, and a bookshelf full of paperbacks I'd actually read. Harper stopped by sometimes, more often lately. We'd reconnected after everything. She never pushed, never probed. Just showed up with Thai food or a new podcast recommendation and that calm energy you don't realize you've been missing until it's in the room. One night, she brought over a project, an old cedar bench from her grandmother's porch. Think you can fix it? I ran my hand over the splintered top. I can do more than fix it. We worked on it together. Sanded it down. Restained the wood. Rebuilt the legs. It took a few weekends, a lot of bad jokes, and one near miss with a power drill. But when we finally set it out on my balcony, it felt right. She sat down first. Looked out at the sky, still streaked orange from sunset. You ever think about what your life would have looked like if you'd gone through with it? She asked. I shook my head. No. She smiled. Why not? I thought about it. Then said, because I stopped looking backward the second I stopped chasing people who only clapped for me when I was losing. She didn't say anything. Just reached into her bag, pulled out a small brass plaque, and handed it to me. It read, Built for peace, not performance. We screwed it onto the side of the bench. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. And when I sat beside her, no crowd, no pressure, no masks, I realized something. The best revenge wasn't walking away. It was walking into something better.